This is Chaim Brovender. I was asked to speak about the love of Torah. And it's a topic that I like to speak about, and I hope I can get it right. You know, when I was a young man and thinking about what would be, it never occurred to me that I would be a Rosh Yeshiva. I don't have people in my family who do that, and I just never assumed that that would happen. So things that were unexpected happened to me. Uh, Things unexpectedly happened to me. And as a result, I spent my life learning Torah, teaching Torah. And even though I've reached kind of an advanced age, I think that the fact that I still learn Torah pretty intensively and that I teach Torah mostly on the internet, I mean, that has kind of indicated de facto that this is really what I should be doing. I think I mean, we tell it in different ways, but I think the former Lubavitcher Rebbe gave me that bracha. Actually, he told me to do it, but uh, I look upon it as a bracha, as a something special that happened for me in his office. And so I'm forever thankful to the Rebbe for directing me in his way to the work that I did in my lifetime. So we're talking about the love of Torah, and it's almost Shavuot, and we all know that Shavuot is a holiday that celebrates Matan Torah, the fact that the Torah was given to Bnei Israel at a particular time, at a particular day, at a particular moment, and we celebrate that time and that moment. However, it's important to remember that that celebration that we do today, this idea that we say again and again on that day, Zman Matan Toratenu, that we celebrate the time of the giving of the Torah, something remarkable, which did not happen to another group, another people, another place, only to Am Yisrael, only to the Jewish people. And the celebration on Shavuot is the celebration of the Jewish people receiving the Torah. However, if you think about it, or if you look at the entire Chumash, it's true that the giving of the Torah to Moshe Rabbeinu, who in turn gave it to Bnei Yisrael, is clearly stated in the Torah. However, what is not clearly stated, in the Torah, that there is a holiday that represents or that reviews or that indicates that this actually happened. I mean, is the celebration of an event in history. And that event is called Yetziat Mitzrayim, the exodus of Bnei Yisrael from Egypt. It was miraculous, it was unique, it was special. And on the night of Pesach, we tell the story again and again and again, better and better every year. That's what we do, we tell the story. But we never tell the story in the Chumash, does not direct us. I mean, the other historical time is Sukkot, and we talk about how it was in the desert and what God did for us and what the rewards that we received in the desert from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what they were, what those rewards were. So there's Pesach and there's Sukkot. But there is no holiday in the Torah for Matan Torah. So what happened? How did we get that holiday? How did we get the holiday of Shavuot if it's not in the Torah? So the answer is that there is a holiday in the Chumash, in the Torah, called Shavuot. But it's not the holiday that we're talking about. It's not the holiday of giving the Torah. It's a different holiday. It's the holiday of counting the weeks, or the way we count weeks, we count days from the second day of Pesach, until the 50th day, the 49th day, the 50th day is Shavuot. Now that counting is the counting between 2 points that are very important. The first point is the time that Chadash, the new wheat, can be eaten every place in the world. And the second point, the 50th day, is the day that the Chadash can be eaten in the Beit HaMikdash. And we could go into that, but it's enough for us to remember today that point A and point B have nothing to do really with Matan Torah, except for the fact that everything in the Torah is connected to Matan Torah, but it doesn't really have the coloration of Matan Torah. We don't think about Matan Torah necessarily. That's not we count connecting Chadash A to Chadash B. That's what we count. And then we find that at some later point in history, let's say in the time of the Tanaim, the ones who created the Mishnah and Medrashei Halacha, right? So we have a lot of material information from the Tanaim. They also created a calendar that repeats itself every 28 years, the same calendar every cycle. That's how we did it. Now, in order to do that, we had to kind of do something that seems to be uprooting a Torah position. The Torah position is that the new moon, when it's viewed by two witnesses, so two witnesses could be a little bit more, we could be a little more liberal about who these two witnesses are. When it's viewed, that we could establish the new moon. Now, the Torah recognizes, the Mishnah recognizes the fact that a month can always be malay, can be chaser, can be a shorter month, a longer month. It could be a day differentiating the shorter month and the longer month. So that in the earlier times, if we assume that Matan Torah was Vav Sivan, the 6th day of the month of Sivan, which itself is problematic, but let us agree for the purpose of this discussion that that Matan Torah was on Vav Sivan, the 6th day of Sivan, in order to make the 6th day of Sivan to come out on the day that the Torah calls Shavuot, and make those days kind of equal to the 50th day of Sfirat HaOmer, it wasn't such an easy feat. It wasn't such an easy feat. But we did it. We have a calendar. We count Sfirat HaOmer. We count every night. And we get to the 49th day, and we know that the 49th day is the day before the holiday. Holiday meaning there's certain limitations that we have. It's not like Shabbat, but there's certain limitations. And those limitations take place and make the holiday of Shavuot more significant, more serious. And so suddenly we find ourselves, because it's Vav Sivan, we find ourselves having a holiday for Matan Torah. It's important to remember that this holiday of Matan Torah was created by the Chachamim, who created the calendar, who made sure that Vav Sivan would always come out on the 50th day of Sivat HaOmer. And so the 50th day of Sivat HaOmer, which in the Torah is a holiday about Chadash, we have devised a way to make that holiday Zman Matan Torateinu, the time that the Torah was given. It's the holiday of the giving of the Torah. Now, before I continue with this kind of discussion, I would like to just remind you that in the list of mitzvot that a Jew has to perform, and here I'm talking about men and women equally, you'll see in a moment, Talmud Torah, the idea of learning Torah ranks very high. We all have to learn Torah. Talmud Torah is absolutely democratic. It has nothing to do with your gender. It has nothing to do with your competence, your talent, your ability, nothing at all. Every person, as he is, or as she is obliged to learn Torah. And every morning, every man and every woman is obliged to say the brachot that give us the right to learn Torah. Asher kiddushanu mitzvotav, that's what we say in the morning, v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Everybody. And you would think that since learning Torah is not always easy, and it's an intellectual and academic tour de force, it's not so easy, not something that you could do just by the by. So you would think that the Jewish people would be concerned about training rabbis, training judges, training librarians, training people who have to really know the stuff very well. But no, Talmud Torah is absolutely democratic. It applies to every single person and it's not at all based on achievement. It's only based on love. Every person is obliged, therefore, to learn or to teach himself to love the Torah, because that's what keeps it going. That's what enables everybody to become a student of the Torah, love. And if you think about it, you'll see that love is kind of such a basic ingredient in the relationship to Torah, and it could not be any other way. Just as a parent loves his children, all of them, but not because they are very clever or because they are very talented, although that's very nice. But even if you find that your children are kind of average, the love remains boundless. If you think about siblings, somehow, for some reason, two brothers or two sisters or a brother and a sister who in the outside world just wouldn't get along. They wouldn't find any reason to deal with each other. But brothers, siblings, they love each other. They love. And so the Rambam who believed that all the mitzvot in the Torah should be done with love, the Rambam takes the time to explain to us what this love is. And I'll just read a few lines from the Rambam, and you'll see how the Rambam understood it. The Rambam in Hilchot Tshuva, Perek Yud Halacha Gimel, the Rambam says, Keitzad hi ahava ha'reuyah. I've mentioned before that when you do things, you have to do them with love. You have to have a relationship with God. You have to be able to feel that you're doing the right thing, not just that you're preparing for an exam or preparing to do something in life, although those things are very important, and I don't deny that. But the Rambam said there's an extra measure. There's an extra measure in your relationship to HaKadosh Baruch Hu called Ahava. And he says, how do you do that? How do you love? How do you love the Torah? Shehavet Hashem Ahava Gedolah Yetera Azamod. You have to love God in a powerful manner until his soul is tied, chained with the love of God. And listen to this, the Rambam says, you have to think about that love all the time, as though someone who is sick with the sickness of love. You see, I don't think most people think of the Rambam as being a romantic, but obviously the Rambam knew something about romance. He says it. He says, Ki'ilu shechole chole ava. He's sick with the sickness of love. What is that? What are the symptoms? She'ein dato pnuya me'avat otah isha. Just like he's in love with a woman, with a particular woman. And he thinks of her all the time, whether he's sitting or standing, whether he's eating and drinking, all the time. Can't get her out of his mind. Tiyeh avat Hashem b'leiv ohavav shogim batamid. And similarly, a person should have that feeling, that love for HaKadosh Baruch Hu all the time. Should feel it all the time. He should be able to say, this is the way of my love. I love HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I love the Torah. I love the mitzvah. Love. I don't just do them. I'm not a Boy Scout trying to get merit badges. It's just that I have this wondrous feeling. I love the Torah. I love what I'm doing with the Torah. So that not only is Talmud Torah democratic, which is what I pointed out previously, when you say the bracha every morning, La'asok b'divrei Torah, we're here. We get up and we say, Ribono shel olam, we're here. We're ready. We're going to do it. Thank you for waking us up. Thank you for giving us life. Now we're going to give you love. That's what the Rambam wants us to do. And so that the love, Avat Hashem, loving God, is something that permeates the mitzvot. And the closest mitzvah to kind of understanding something about God and something about what's going on in the world is Talmud Torah. It is Talmud Torah. And even though we can make the bracha in the morning and learn the Torah in the afternoon or the evening, still the Siddur gives us several options of Talmud Torah, as though the Siddur says, you don't want to wait. You don't wait to express your love for the Torah. You want to get in there. You want to do something. So if you look at your Siddur, if you look at the prayer book that you use, you'll find that there's Torah learning in the beginning of the Siddur. A lot of it. actually, a lot of Torah learning, a lot of opportunity to do the mitzvah of Talmud Torah immediately. Immediately. So we see that love of Torah, it can be expressed as an extension of or a prelude to love of God, the feeling that you're connected somehow to HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes through the learning of Torah. And the learning of Torah doesn't mean that you have to be an expert in some aspect of the Torah, although that's a wonderful thing and a great thing to desire, but just being involved, just doing it, just having a study partner, somebody to learn the Torah with, just all of those things, or any of those things, enables the love of Torah. Any of those things that enables the love of Torah. What I think, I'm trying to understand this holiday that we call Shavuot, which changed from a holiday about using the Chadash wheat from the Pesach in the larger community, and then 50 days later, also in the Beit Hamikdash, and that switched when the calendar was invented, and it switched into the holiday that we call Zman Matan Torah, the time of Matan Torah, which is the 6th day of Sivan, and which always turns out to be after the 50 days of Sfirat HaOmer, right? The 50 days of Sfirat HaOmer. So what is it? What is going on? Again, I think people like to talk about the nature of Am Yisrael, like what makes Am Yisrael into Am Yisrael. I mean, some people would say that it has to do with particular mitzvot, like the people who circumcise their children or the people who eat matzah on Pesach. Uh, well, it's it's possible. It's possible that both of those things are important, and that they say something about the nature of Am Yisrael, but I don't think that covers all the bases. I think that the thing that we have to be proudest of, and the thing that we are most determined to protect, is the Torah. The Torah is who we are. We are the people who learn Torah. That we are the people. We're the people who won't give up, and we see often that people who are willing to give up the Torah, or willing to say, we don't need the Torah, those people don't manage, they don't manage to stay strong as Jews. But you see it in America, in England, the people who are not connected to the Torah, they become disconnected entirely. Now, in Eretz Israel, thankfully, it's a little bit different, because in Eretz Israel, there's a lot of Jewishness. I mean, Beit Avichai, for example, there are a lot of opportunities for people to express their Jewishness and to connect to the Jewish people. I mean, the undertaking the undertaking that's called Medinat Yisrael is remarkable by any stretch of the imagination. It's absolutely remarkable that all the different kinds of people, all the different interest groups in Eretz Israel are able to come together, to maintain themselves, just to be able to say we are Am Yisrael. That's really, really remarkable. I mean, to say that the people came to Eretz Israel speaking other languages, and they all agreed that they would speak Ivrit, Hebrew. I mean, isn't that's a miracle? That's a miracle, without a doubt. And it's a way of defining who Am Yisrael is. Am Yisrael are people who speak Hebrew. However, I don't think that any of those definitions carry the profound understanding of self that is necessary to maintain. And we can't just become Hebrew speaking, but, unreasonable, ununderstanding, unprofound, unspecial. We have to have something that ties us together. And I think that something is Talmud Torah, the study of Torah. And I also said, I told you that I think that the study of Torah demands love. It demands love of Torah because it does not offer pragmatic kind of rewards, but it does offer a kind of closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that everybody yearns for and wants. And while it is true, I admit that not everyone gets it at the same time, and not everybody can speak of themselves as great students of Torah or lovers of Torah. Nevertheless, I bring myself as an example of someone who developed into, took a long time, but I think I developed into a lover of Torah, an understander of the connection between the Kodesh Baruch Hu and Am Yisrael that actually defines who Am Yisrael is. I mean, the thing about us that you have to admit is that we were really stubborn about learning Torah, about creating options of learning Torah for different people, and that I myself had uh, this opportunity to learn Torah with young men and young women, and that's what we did. We learned Torah, and if I was able to transmit a bit of the love of Torah, then that's nothing that would make the thought of that certainly would make me happy and give me that feeling of fulfillment that it was all worth it. It was worth it, whatever it was, whatever else I may have given up, it was worth it. And so uh, the idea that Shavuot is like two holidays. It's the earlier holiday and the later holiday. And you could say to us, so how did that happen? How come Shavuot, the holiday of Matan Torah, is not mentioned in the Torah itself? I mean, doesn't it seem to be a reasonable thing that we should be able to learn Torah together? We should be able to celebrate Matan Torah. Celebrate Matan Torah. I remember many years ago, I was invited. You know how these things work. They don't always know who they're inviting, and you don't always know why you're getting invited. So they invited me to talk about Matan Torah. It was a parsha of Yitro. I was talking on the radio, I think. That was many years ago. I think it was your own London. So anyway, they asked me questions like, "What do you think about Matan Torah?" And how does they were trying to outsmart me. And he probably did outsmart me because I was a little naive. I said, "Oh, want to know something?" But maybe they didn't want to know something. So they said to me, "Well, what do you think about the story of Matan Torah?" So I told them what I'm going to tell you. I told them what I'm going to tell you, and even though they didn't like it, I like it. So I'm telling you. I don't know anything about the history as history of the events that are related in the Torah. But I find it amazing that we can learn and make something out of every jot and tittle. Everything in the Torah has been analyzed and taken apart and put back together again. And still we can keep doing it. We can keep doing it, finding new ideas and new truths and new ways. You imagine that the Dayenu and Pesach, you all say, Ilu kervanu lifnei har Sinai, v'lo natan lanu et Torah. Dayenu, oh, if God had only brought us to Har Sinai and not given us the Torah, that would have been the greatest. That would have been wonderful. Great, wonderful. I mean, how can you say a thing like that? That you're willing to do without the Torah? I mean, the Torah is what keeps us going. That's who we are. That's what I think we're going to have to decide. That learning is what Am Yisrael is all about. And of course, we can speak Hebrew when we're learning. So how could it be that the author of or that part of the Haggadah said, "Ilu keravanu lifnei har Sinai v'lo natan lanu et Torah dayenu." So you have to understand what dayenu is. Dayenu says that if you look really carefully at things, the miraculous moment is every moment. It's not just they left Mitzrayim and they got the Torah. It's not like that. Every step they took, leaving Mitzrayim, every interaction that was recorded, everything that was spoken by the people at that time was itself a miracle. So Ilu Kervanu Lifnei Har Sinai, if God had only brought us to Har Sinai, wow, that would have been really a miracle. Because it would have included the fact that we were worthy of being there. That itself was a remarkable miracle that Am Yisrael was taught about. A remarkable miracle. So everything, I mean, that's what Ahavat Torah gives you, according to Dayenu. It makes even walking up to the Torah, grabbing onto the book that you're learning, it's also a miracle. It's also a miracle because it's the kind of learning which is expansive. Everybody has the right to make a chidush, a novel interpretation, but it's not just novel, it's personal. It belongs to you. You can say it to your study partner. You can say it to your family on Shabbat. It's yours. It's yours to give away. And it's yours to invite everybody around you to enjoy, to understand, to become part of that. So I think that what happened was, after Matan Torah, the guy is given the Torah to Bnei Yisrael through Moshe Rabbeinu. And then we are directed to build the tabernacle. And at the heart of the tabernacle, there is the Ohel Moed, the tent where people meet together. But in the Ohel Moed, there's a section that's called Kodesh Kodashim, the Holy of Holies. And in the Holy of Holies, there is an ark. And in the ark, there are the commandments, the broken commandments, the regular commandments, and some other things. So that in a manner of speaking, At the beginning, Matan Torah was not a day. It was not a date. It was there all the time. As the Ramban explains, the Mishkan was built on the model of Har Sinai. Maybe that's Ilu Kervanu Lifnei Har Sinai. Maybe it would have been enough to be able to imitate Har Sinai. Moshe Rabbeinu said we have to, when he came down from the mountain the second time or the third time or the fourth time, he came down from the mountain with the Luchot HaBrit, with the 10 Commandments. And Moshe Rabbeinu said, here we better build the Mishkan, the tabernacle, because only the tabernacle can connect us to the events of Matan Torah. And then finally, after 400 years, they came into Eretz Israel, Eretz Canaan. 400 years later, they made the Beit HaMikdash. So through all of those years from the time of Matan Torah until they built the Beit HaMikdash, there was always a place which might be the place of Matan Torah, the place where the Torah was given, that came with Bnei Israel. It became their identity. That's who they are. And when they fought battles, they took the Torah with them. And even if there was an event in time where the Torah was stolen, but eventually they worked to get it back, because it was, again, their identifying feature. And that was true through Churban Bayit Rishon, through the destruction of the temple, because it was only, the exile lasted only for 50 years. And they rebuilt again until Churban Bayit Sheni in the year 70. That was a Churban and a Galut which would not be resolved. It would not be resolved quickly. But Jewish history reached a point where everything had to change. And the point where everything had to change was the destruction of the Second Temple in the hands of the Romans. And the exile of Am Yisrael, the exile of the Jewish people, where there was no longer a mikdash, a temple, and there was no longer a mishkan, a tabernacle, and there was no place to keep the 10 Commandments, and the idea of the Beit HaMikdash as being the representative of Matan Torah came to an end. So the Chachamim understood very well that they had to make Azman Matan Torah. They lost what they had. They lost the temple and they lost the tabernacle. Lost it, meaning it was no longer possible to say we have it. And so there had to be the creation of the holiday of Shavuot, which became the holiday of Matan Torah, even though Shavuot existed, but it did not exist in a way that enabled the holiday to become Zman Matan Toratenu. That was something that the Chachamim invented. And it was a wondrous invention, because they said, that's who we are. That's who Am Yisrael is. They are the people who learn the Torah. And we celebrate Zman Matan Toratenu. In the olden days, they didn't have to celebrate. They had it with them all the time. They were always with the Torah and with Matan Torah, either in the Mishkan or later on the Beit HaMikdash and the Second Temple as well. They had it. But when the Romans destroyed the temple and they understood that it was HaKadosh Baruch Hu who was kind of punishing Am Yisrael, they knew, I think, they knew that they needed to make Shavuot, the Shavuot of the Torah, into the holiday of Zman Matan Toratenu, and they did that, and they did that. So I hope that I haven't tired you out, and that my confessions will be taken with a smile. The fact of the matter is that I'm happy to have been able to have the merit of teaching students who were anxious to learn Torah. And I did my best to teach them as honestly as I could. And I think that if you'd ask me, what is it that a teacher of Torah has to have more than any other feature of his personality, is he has to feel that he's teaching what he is. He's teaching himself. He's not just teaching about something, but he's teaching himself. And I always told that to the people who worked in the yeshiva or people who taught the women in Bruriya. I always said, just teach what you know. It doesn't really matter what you teach. It doesn't really matter if you have a curriculum, because the point is that you have to generate interest amongst the students to redefine themselves within the context of the Torah. And to do that, the students need models. They have to be able to point to somebody who can do that. And it doesn't really matter what you teach, because after the student gets that kind of impetus, that student is going to go on his own and will learn yet more than the people who taught him. And so it doesn't really matter. Curriculum doesn't really matter, in my opinion. It doesn't matter what you teach. It only matters that you teach it honestly and devotedly, and as the Rambam says, with love. It's got to be done with love. That's the love, for the love of Torah. Okay, so we have a little time. If somebody has a question, I'm supposed to sit here and answer it.
You can sit, you can stand. First of all, Rabbi, thank you very much. I think there are many, many people who've had the honor of being your students or students of your students, and your impact on the world of Torah is very meaningful. If anyone has a question, this is a time. And if not, I'm sure we're all inspired to continue on to Shavuot and to devote the time for learning Torah. Thank you very much. And I'm glad we got through the little interruption. So soon Chag Sameach to everybody, and we hope to see you at future events at Beit Avichai. Thanks, Rabbi Brovender.
All the best. Be well. Okay. Should I leave? I'm going to leave.
Yeah, I guess we could say goodbye and yep. Thank you very much.